So before we start, Shannon, I said I needed to get a coffee before we started clicking record here. What's in the Starbucks mug?
In mine, I have an almond milk latte. It's my go-to.
I tell you what, for an episode on female training, female health, I don't want to sound misogynistic straight away, but that is a girl's coffee, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
No, to get a black Americano, simple, does the job.
I do sometimes when I'm on those hardcore days, but I mean, little latte was needed today. Too splendid.
My wife gets iced vanilla latte, extra syrup, sugar-free syrup.
Yeah.
And it's like, you basically just want it to taste not like coffee. Just don't get a coffee. Get a milkshake.
That's literally it. We want it as sweet as possible, so we just mask the coffee.
So for people that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about Shannon, what she does, who she helps, and go over your sort of career to point.
Yeah, so I am Shannon, obviously. I own my online coaching business called Shape by Shan, and I coach I'm a female health and transformation coach. Coach women, getting them to feel strong, getting them in tune with their bodies. And I like to kind of think of myself where it's a case of female health meeting physique development. So making sure that, yes, we're getting them that kind of physique result that most people come on coaching for. But alongside that, we're making sure their health's in a really good place so that they can kind of progress past that and not have them coming into this cycle that I find the females are always in. They're quote unquote on the wagon, then they leave a coach, then they're off the wagon, then they have to start again and they go in this vicious cycle. So yeah, kind of breaking that cycle and making sure they're set up for long-term success as well.
So that you think that should be a given, right? That health should be first, but the fact of it is that it isn't, and it is almost like a niche in itself that you've carved yourself into. What is the story behind this? Like, why have you decided to go? Is it something with yourself or something you've seen in the industry? Like, why is it that you've gone into a health first approach?
Yeah, I feel a few reasons. So one, probably personal, and where I kind of see things moving as well. So I obviously competed last year, the year before. Last year. And up until then, I was very much, in the bodybuilding space. I was very much, physique was, the main thing that mattered. Obviously, I had an unbelievable coach, shout out to Alex, who always made sure health was kind of, a very important aspect of that. But as you know, when you compete, you're going to those extremes. Health isn't necessarily the main thing that needs to be looked after when you get to those low levels of body fat. And, we all know what competing entails. So I thought that was, my thing. Competing was my purpose. So competed for the first time. Was planning on competing again. We mapped out the whole next season. I was taking a year off season, and to get to where I wanted to be at that time, we had decided that I would have to go down the assisted route, which at the time I was fine with, because I was, if I want to get to these levels of being a pro athlete, which we all know, you're very unlikely to get there naturally unless you have insane genetics. So that was the plan. And the more I thought about it, and the more I thought about my last prep, so obviously I did lose my cycle. Only about 10 weeks out from my show, I got it back quite quickly, but it was after competing that I had this kind of thought that I never really had before, where my period wasn't coming back, and I just wanted to come back because I just didn't feel, number one, healthy. Not that I didn't feel like a female, but it was just, I just knew it wasn't coming back, and that meant, okay, there's something not right here. My body's not in a healthy place. So for me, that flicked on a switch that was a priority for me. Got my cycle back, kept continuing with the plan to compete again. And then just the more I thought about it, the more I started growing my own business and teaching my clients about female health and prioritizing health, and then going down more of the route of looking at hormones and hormone health and menstrual cycle. There was just a bit of a disconnect with what I was trying to work towards and what I was trying to prioritize with my clients and my business. And it came to a point where I had to sit down and I asked, I was chatting obviously we all love, other people's opinions, and I was talking to Sean, my boyfriend, and he was saying, this is completely your decision, if you don't want to compete anymore, it's up to you. Anyway, I sat down, made the decision, and I had to envision myself a year's time. Okay, let's say I'm on the pro stage, I get a pro card, how do you feel? And I didn't care. And for me, that was the decision made. It wasn't, lining up with my values anymore. I didn't understand why I actually was moving that direction anymore. So that from then, when I made the decision, I told Alex just competing wasn't for me anymore. It was like this relief had been lifted, and I said, I told my clients, obviously, and even they said, and I know now that I'm so much more aligned with my values at the minute and my business and what I'm preaching to the girls and what I'm telling them. And that's my purpose. And when I thought that maybe competing was my purpose a few years ago, and this is my purpose, I want to get on stage, I want to be a pro bodybuilder, absolutely not. Looking back now, that was so far from what I want to do, and what maybe at the time my values were a little bit different, but it's just taken a complete 360. And yeah, so kind of from that personal perspective of competing and wanting my health and my hormones to be in a good place, and also what I value, and I just see, I think the industry going that way a little bit, but also it needs to be prioritized a bit more as well, I think, in terms of kind of health.
I think you're right there. I think you've been very wise in the fact that you actually looked and go, right, does this actually align with my values? Because I've spent a lot of time, I've worked with a few people that have got pro cards in various divisions, and for every person that it is the most important thing, and it was a massive impact on their business and their self-pride and who they were as a person, there are 3 people there. It either wasn't what they wanted it to be, or they didn't care a year afterwards. And I think we're finally coming through this, but we had a massive period of time in the 2010s where everything was very short term. What do I need to look like? What's the placing that I've got? Yeah. And then you forget, how much are you going to sacrifice your health when you don't care when you're 31? Yeah. But I know now in my 30s, I don't care about being jacked and shredded in the same way. And I'm trying to find what fitness is to me now compared to when I was 22. But thankfully, I didn't put my health at a massive risk in my 20s and put myself at a detriment now when it wasn't as important as me. Yeah. So for going into the cycle stuff, because obviously losing your cycle was a big part of that story. Mm-hmm. For people who have maybe dieted, maybe had this experience, let's delve into first what actually is a monthly cycle, because I think people expect it to be like clockwork, and that's not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this comes from growing up, and I'm speaking for myself, and I'd say a large proportion of, especially Ireland and the UK, we go through school and we grow up as females, and we're not actually taught what we need to know about the menstrual cycle. We're taught basically you have a period every month, it's going to be a bit annoying, you'll be quite sore with cramps, and that's it. That's genuine. And it was only, I'd say, this past few years where I've actually realized how important our menstrual cycle is. So what we don't realize as well, that we need to ovulate every month in order to create our hormones, estrogen and progesterone, that we obviously need for health now, but also health in the future. So a lot of us think that, we only need to worry about ovulation if we want to get pregnant, which is what we've been kind of made to believe, where that's not the case. We need to be producing those hormones every month for, as I said, health now, but also when we get older, those hormones start to naturally decline. So if we aren't banking them every month, and that's what I like to think of it as, it's like a monthly deposit into your kind of bank of long-term health, every healthy ovulation you have. So when you look at it like that, and when you sit and think, okay, if I'm not having regular cycles or regular even ovulation every month, because you can have a period without ovulating, which we'll probably get into, but if I'm not having that every month, and that's gone on for extended amounts of years for different reasons, you could be obviously on, hormonal birth control, you could have hypothalamic amenorrhea, all these different things as to why you're not having a regular cycle. That's then putting you into years and years and years. We are not building up that reserve of hormones for later life. And just as I said, health now, and I think it's just something that we're just so unaware of, which isn't our fault. We just haven't been given that education around how important regular menstrual cycle is.
How regular should a regular menstrual cycle be?
So anywhere from 21 to 35 days. And that's, people will probably be quite surprised at that, because in every textbook you see, it's 28 days. You have to have a 28-day cycle. And that's what we all grew up thinking, okay, every 4 weeks, this is what it's going to come.
And is it the same? If you're 21, is it 21, 21, 21, 21, 21? Or is it 21, 35, 28, 24? Does it vary?
Usually you'll have the same cycle. And when you start to track it properly, you'll know, how long your cycle is, when roughly you ovulate, if you are ovulating, what your kind of quote unquote normal healthy cycle looks like. Yeah, it's usually the same every month. Okay,
cool. So when we're looking at that, what are some of the reasons that could affect your cycle? You mentioned a few of them now, but a lot of the people listening to this are either coaches who have had women lose their cycle or women who have lost their cycle. Yeah. When this happens, why is it happening?
So there are a few reasons. A big one is something called hypothalamic amenorrhea. So this is usually when a girl is either under eating, not eating enough carbs, or overtraining. So this is something that you'll see quite prevalent, obviously, in the industry if people are over dieted, overtrained, sorry. And that's where your period starts basically in your brain. So we have kind of an axis that it starts in your brain, it gives down these signals to your reproductive system to start producing hormones that start your menstrual cycle. If your brain obviously detects that you are, not able to carry a baby, because that's what the system is there for basically, it's going to shut that off, and that's where you're going to start missing periods. Also, if you're chronically stressed, and I think this is something that's so underrated, and I know you'll agree with this, like if you are chronically stressed all the time, and again, our brain doesn't know if you are just really, really stressed in that fight or flight response all the time because of work and, outside stressors with daily life, or you're, running from a tiger, and it will shut off that system because, again, you're in no place to be able to carry a baby, and that's what it's there for. So those are two big reasons. Other ones with irregular cycles will be things that are underlying. So maybe if you have PCOS, which I think it's like 1 in 10 women now have, that can be something that's affecting irregular cycles. It can be if you're not producing enough estrogen, you're going to have lighter cycles, regular cycles. So it could be something underlying. And again, there's so many reasons. It could be something as simple as being low in some mineral or vitamin. That's kind of causing irregularities. It could be something more severe, like I mentioned, PCOS, that needs to kind of be looked at.
So there's a few things to unpack there. And I think the stress thing is for a lot of coaches that are going to be listening to this, I think most of my audience is coaches, not every one of them, but it's people, and we'll go into this more later on, but people overcomplicate this so much. I have seen articles on this. I remember like when I was just starting out as a coach, your articles always on T Nation, right? That's the only thing you read, right? And you had 4 different macro splits. You had different training every week. It's the world's most complicated diet. But I think that there's one thing if you coaches take away from this is looking at the stressor. And this is the same with everybody, but it's just, I think it's more important when you're dealing with females who maybe have more going on and maybe have more things that can go wrong. But if the brain is controlling everything and we are stressed, our body's going to shut down everything that isn't a priority to survival right now, including things like digestion, including things like cycles, menstrual, reproduction. This is why guys tend to, don't get morning wood and their testosterone goes to the floor, and why women lose their cycles. So because you said it earlier on, it's not always the healthiest thing to get super lean. And while people go, oh, well, then I shouldn't do it then. Well, that depends what you want. Like, if you want to get super lean, then yes, we have to, it's not the healthiest thing. Like being number 1 in rugby or football or Brazilian jiu-jitsu or any sport or running a multi-million-pound business isn't the healthiest thing. But it's now like, okay, how do we try and minimize the negative side effects of this? So if I know that I'm going to be creating stress through a deficit and someone loses the cycle, could I start to eliminate things from the stress cup in other ways? Could I bring down training volume just to bring the stress down enough to make sure this isn't the thing that's getting knocked off 6? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why I kind of like the idea of health meeting physique development, because at the end of the day, yes, I absolutely have girls who want to get, quote unquote, photo shoot lean. I want to put myself through another, photo shoot kind of prep. And it's one of those where we constantly want to be challenging ourselves or pushing our physique or whatever outcome we want. But as you said, if you can kind of make sure that health markers are in a good place going into that, you're going to be able to mitigate those kind of negative responses when it comes to the menstrual cycle. So yeah, and I think it's taken that, few months or whatever it may be to make sure that those foundations are there, because so many people want to just dive straight into an extreme prep where it's like, okay, let's and it comes down to that, playing the long game. Let's take an extra few months to make sure health is in a really, really good place. Digestion's in a good place. You're having, regular cycles. You're sleeping well. All those little things that people don't necessarily want to spend time on. But if you take those few months to build those foundations and then say, right, your body's actually in a really responsive place. Now let's go into our prep and now let's push a little bit harder because we know we can. Then that's exactly how I kind of do it with my girls.
And that's the key thing there, right? It's are they ready for an extreme prep? I think sometimes when we look at the personal training, we always look at ways of making things easier and removing friction. And while I think that's massively important for any coaching business to make things easier for their clients, at some point it's got to get difficult. And it's not a case of we don't push. It's not a case it doesn't get hard. It's not the case that we don't put the body under stress. It's like, right, Are you ready for that stress? And that will change at 20. We said it earlier on, at 22, 23, when all I had to think about was eat, sleep, work, repeat, train hard. Then even as a guy, I could diet much harder than maybe I can now, running a business at 33, married, having to worry about bills and rent and all these other things. My life isn't set up in that same way, in the same way that someone that's maybe been on the contract, we'll come back to this, the contractor pill for 10 years, might not be in the same place as that person who's 16, never ever made that decision, and everything's running as smoothly as it should be. Before we get into the pill, because I think that's a really interesting topic, you mentioned PCOS. That has become such a buzzword in the female health space right now. I feel that every coach is mentioning the term PCOS. So I kind of want to do an intro to it for people that don't know. What is PCOS? And why does it happen?
Yeah, so it's polycystic ovarian syndrome. There's actually 4 types, and I think a lot of people don't know this either. So there's 4 types, and it cannot be diagnosed without a blood test. So what we see now is people they say they have PCOS because they've got an ultrasound and they can see cysts, whereas every female will have those. They're just the follicles you will have on your ovaries. So if you have been diagnosed with PCOS but it has been through a blood test, just know that you may not actually have it. And this is where some confusion comes between hypothalamic amenorrhea and PCOS, because they both show us the same symptoms, but the treatments for both are very, very different.
So what are the symptoms of both of those things?
So with PCOS, you will have you have to have a cycle that is maybe 45 days or more over 2 or 3 months. When you get a blood test, you will have heightened levels of androgen. So this is why people with PCOS will usually have things like facial hair. They'll have some more kind of male characteristics. They'll usually carry more weight around their abdomen area. And you also will then have the ultrasound showing cysts. So you need to have those 3 things to actually confirm that you have it. Now, the most common type is insulin-resistant PCOS. So this accounts for, I think, 70% of PCOS. And it's kind of like one of those which came first. There has to be a little bit more research, because people ask, okay, well, if someone is, overweight, insulin resistant, does that cause PCOS? Or is it because they have PCOS that they've now become insulin resistant? And it's a bit of that like chicken and the egg situation. But what I would say is PCOS can be massively managed with diet and lifestyle factors. And this is where I have the issue. And I think it's one of those where you go to, the GP, they say you have PCOS, and look, the GP, the doctor, there to manage symptoms. So they usually hand you the pill. That's going to regulate your periods. It's going to, help with symptoms. And people say, oh, this is great. This is managing my symptoms. But they're not actually getting to the root cause. They're not, cured. They're not helping their PC or their insulin resistance. They're not kind of helping those symptoms. They're just going on the pill and not actually knowing or being aware of what that's actually doing on the other side of things in terms of, fertility and reproductive health. So
would you recommend, because I saw your video on this, and again, we'll go on to the pill later on, but if we assume the pill has been given to the doctor, and we're not doctors, so we can't necessarily say that they're wrong.
No.
And they're taking that and it managed the symptoms. Would you then say, okay, but let's start looking at things like fasting blood glucose, HbA1c on blood tests, just so we can manage insulin resistance? And even if we're not showing the signs of insulin resistance as much anymore, we can then manage it in the background so we don't end up with things like diabetes down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as I said, with managing insulin resistance, we both know you can do that massively through diet and lifestyle. But I think, and this comes down to sometimes too, and I get it, because obviously if you have PCOS, you don't want the symptoms, you don't want the painful periods, you don't want the heavy periods, you would just want something to help it. And sometimes it can be seen as a little bit more effort to obviously change your diet completely and change your lifestyle. And so this is sometimes the issue, because some people would rather just take a pill, and that's fine, to get the symptoms gone, rather than maybe have to do without their weekly Chinese, or maybe have to avoid certain things that are going to cause inflammation, and that can be obviously more difficult to do. So I do get why going on the pill can be seen as a little bit easier. And as you said, absolutely not saying doctors are wrong, absolutely not. But sometimes I think there just needs to be a little bit more education around why they're maybe putting you on the pill, or why they're not actually getting to any kind of more root causes or root issues of what's going on.
Yeah, I used to be very much those people who go, oh, doctors should like be educated more and things like this. And I'm just like, I look back at my younger self criticizing doctors left, right, and centre. I mean, like, educated more. They've gone through 4 years of medical school. Compared to them, I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
So I may have been my high horse going, they should learn more. I should learn more, you know, like. But I also understand the logic of them just medicating stuff. I never used to. But when you look at the amount of people that don't take life-changing medications, like people on cancer that don't take the medication because of they have the inability to build habits, or just because they don't adhere to stuff. And while we like as coaches, and all the coaches listen to this, one of the biggest things I see as frustrations that the clients don't stick to plans. Right? Adherence is the number one problem that coaches face. And you will speak to them every day. Or if you're in person, you might see them in person 2 to 3 times a week, and you still can't get them to adhere. Yeah. Whereas doctors, you see them once every now and then when something is already wrong.
Yeah.
So it's like, for me, if someone is deficient in magnesium, I will supplement the magnesium. Mm-hmm. Is it the root cause of the problem why they were deficient in magnesium in the first place? No, but I'm putting out a fire. Yeah. And if I can put out the fire, then at least then I maybe put them in a better headspace to work on the other stuff. Or if they don't do any of the other stuff, at least I've done something that's going to help them that requires a minimal barrier to entry.
Yeah.
And that's something I think I don't judge doctors as much anymore for that reason. But that's what we as coaches need to step in, and we are that education. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And many people, I don't know if you agree with this, but like I don't think the coaching space in terms of a wanting to be better, not just wanting to put a zero on your bank balance, is where it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, do you mean coaches aren't as
more financially driven than quality driven?
No.
Yeah,
I think so. And I think that's where sometimes the quality of coaching is being a little bit diluted, because as you said, people just are in it now for the zeros on their bank account. And if they can, there's a quick fix for everything, but if they can find, right, this is going to get them the result, whether that is prioritizing their health or not, they don't really care, because they want to see that buy-in, and they want to see, and obviously that is part and parcel, because we're all coaches, we all have a business to run, so obviously, yes, the business side of it is a massive part, but I think you're right in saying that coaches now aren't willing to maybe self-educate or learn more to become better actual coaches, rather than maybe learning how to sell things and get the buy-in.
And again, I really, really am hesitant to, like, I don't want to sound like the anti-mentor, because I'm really not, right? Like, there's a reason why I've struck in a partnership with Ollie Carson, because the guy is fantastic.
Incredible.
He's really good at what he does. But like, you find, like, 10 years ago, if you wanted to make more money, you got better at your job. And I think it's great that people are now helping people scale and systemize and get out to more people and make themselves look more professional. But if you look at the people you probably look up to, they're probably not doing all of these strategies. They stand out because they're better. And when you're online, like, for sake of you, right, how many female coaches are out there? Why would someone choose Shannon over the other thousands of coaches that are there? I think the fact that you are upskilling yourself and you're good at this sort of stuff and you're enough to provide courses to help other coaches, it just is a showcase of, right, this is why I go to her, because she's upskilling herself.
Yeah, I think it comes down to too, like, it comes down to, and it sounds really cheesy, but you have to ask yourself as a coach, like, is this actually what I want to do? Like, do I genuinely want to coach and help people? Because there's a very big difference between, coming out of maybe a prep yourself or having this big transformation yourself to then actually helping and wanting to help other people. Because I think people get very sucked in with, I want to be an online coach because I can sit in Dubai on a laptop and just money's going to flow in, and they have this thing in their head that I'm going to, maybe do the minimum amount possible to just sell what I can. So there's no actual major coaching going on, and there's no upskilling of the actual coaching skills. It's just, right, let's get on a laptop, let's sell a few programs because I need this transformation myself. Of course, people are going to want to come to me. So yeah, I think it's that question of having to ask yourself, is this actually what I want to do? Like, is this a career I want to be in, or am I just being sucked into it by wanting to have that online coach lifestyle in Dubai? And you have to kind of really ask yourself that question.
Yeah, and I'm not even a fan of Dubai, but I never understood.
I live 40 minutes from it.
I know, like, where is this imaginary Wi-Fi connection I can get on the beach to do my check-ins? I I'm glad we're moving away from that and that, like the reality of online coaching of just like kind of you're going to be sat behind a desk most of the time is coming out, because it's like I love what I do, but my activity has suffered because of now moving into an online space in the last 2-3 months. But at the same time, I'm 2 seconds. This is really awkward on a podcast for someone to buzz the doorbell, isn't it? Literally, that's given my editor more work to do. Really, 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 really sorry. And I guarantee you as well, right? For people who aren't watching this, I've got a flat where my flat tends to be the door that people buzz, even when it's not for me. Yeah, like if someone's not in, they're not answering, they'll come to my door. But until that person knocks on the door again, and we'll tee you off with something so you can like fill the gaps if someone knocks on my door. But yeah, I think, you know, the big thing about like the online coaching space now is that we're starting to realize that, like, for me now moving into this, like, I don't think of this as I'm now switching in to try and do less work. No. I just want to work on my terms. I'm actually doing more work. Like, I'm working longer hours than I was on the gym floor, like truly working, but it's now just something that's more aligned with my values. Yeah. Like, going into this, like, I know you kind of alluded to it with your story, but I'm assuming you were a female coach before that. Why did you niche down into females?
Well, I think you can't really coach what you don't know. So I had a few males in the beginning. This is when I come home from Australia during lockdown, I was in Pure Gym. So I was PT and male and females. I had a few male clients online. And it wasn't that I didn't enjoy coaching them. It's just, I think I just have obviously more of that connection with female clients. I know what they're going through. I've been there. I can identify with them. I can empathize with them. Whereas with a male who, you know, he just wanted to maybe get like jacked and strong for full shape, which was fine. But I didn't have any, I wasn't resonating with it a lot. And then as my kind of brand and my coaching evolved, it just naturally kind of went more down the female route, because I was, you know, it was majority female. There was the community aspect of it. I feel like girls, and I'll ask you this in a second, because I know you coach both, but I feel like girls just love that community feel a bit more, and they love chatting in the group and they love supporting each other. And we were doing coffee meetups and it was very female driven, whereas my male clients, you know, they're very black and white. Tell me what I need to do, tell me what I need to eat, but see you next week, done. And there was that difference, and it was just that disconnect, and I wanted to focus down and kind of like be aligned with what I enjoy doing. And I loved coaching the girls, and I loved that support within the group with them, and kind of really understand it and empathize with where they're coming from and where they want to get to. And I couldn't do that with the males.
I think that's a super important thing, and I know we've gone on a big tangent here. We'll double back onto menstrual cycle stuff, but I think that's so important, because so many coaches, it's not that they don't even know who their niche are, but like they don't think about the niches who responds well to them and the kind of coaching they want to leave. And you've now built a community, you've now built education. We spoke before coming on air about how so many coaches want to have this educational weekly platform, but if you were doing this with guys, you'd probably get one person.
Yeah.
And you now get quite a full turnout. And I think part of that is you've decided to find and create webinars for people who actually want to turn up and enjoy these things and kind of get involved in that. I agree with you with the guys versus girls. And I also think I love the fact now that there are more female coaches speaking to what they know and why they are different to a male coach coaching women, because I'm an old man now, right? So I've seen a lot of changes in the industry, and I remember seeing where I used to work, female coaches come in and find it really, really hard. And I try to wonder why female coaches tend to, nowadays not so much, but back then never lasted 1-2 years throughout the industry. And for a long time it was that. And again, apologies if this sounds misogynistic in any way, but guys tend to want to be trained by a guy that they want to look like. Absolutely. That guy's got big arms, so I want his arms, right? Yeah. And then girls at the time tended to come to personal training. They wanted someone who was maybe a little bit more disagreeable to tell them what they needed to do. That wasn't the cheerleader that kind of go, it's all right, don't worry. And on if we look at averages, sounding like Jordan Peterson here, that guys that tend to be more disagreeable than girls tend to be. So this is why guys tend to negotiate bigger pay rises and things like this, and negotiate better packages. And this kind of synced I found into the coaching world where more girls were rent-a-friends. More guys were like driven. This is what you need to do.
Yeah.
Like, you've carved a very, very successful niche in the women's side of this. How have you battled that?
I think it comes down to very much like knowing each client and having a method that suits them. Because yes, females in general, we will want a little bit more empathy. You know, things come up. We aren't very black and white. We'll need maybe some more leeway in terms of, obviously, if I'm dealing with busy moms and things like that. But you also have to, number one, allow for the clients who respond better to that more authoritarian approach. Tell me what to do. This is what you need to do. And also, in the beginning, I find it quite difficult to get that balance, because like that, I would be more, I suppose, their friend rather than their coach. But it's taken me a while to find that balance. And I know my clients well enough to know, okay, this is the approach they need this week. Or, okay, you know what, they actually haven't done anything this week. They had, no excuse. This is where I needed to pull their socks up. And I'll remind some of them of that from time to time. You are essentially paying me to get you a result that you maybe couldn't have got on your own, or, you want to work towards. So you haven't done this week, why not? And they'll say to me, oh, thanks so much for that. That's what I needed. So I need to remind them sometimes of that. But I think it's very much knowing when to use different coaching styles and methods for different clients and in different periods of maybe times in their life that they're going through.
I agree with that massively. I think it's also as well, it's like finding that balance between, I call it assertive empathy. Because for a while I knew Nick Mitchell always used to say is empathy is one of the biggest skills a personal trainer can possess. And yes, but I think if you look at it on a spectrum, if you're too empathetic, you get no results, because when there are challenges, you are their friend. Yeah. And then if you're too assertive and too like drill sergeant, people get overwhelmed and just like, I don't want anything to do with this. Yeah. So I think assertive empathy is the skill that you need. And to do that, you need to know what is the key non-negotiables that client needs to do. Now, the approach to get to these non-negotiables, like we all know, calorie deficit gets someone losing weight. How many different approaches can we have for a calorie deficit? So many. I don't give a fuck which one you do, as long as you do one of them, and then we can find and troubleshoot these issues. But it's like, I find coaches sometimes either they and this is girls and guys, they mansplain too much. Yeah. The client, especially online, where you can't have that back and forth one-to-one, it's on a pre-recorded thing. The client will have, this is the problem, and go, okay, here's solution. And that's like, well, why are you struggling with this? Yeah. Like, if you let me know why you're struggling, I will help you. But it always comes down to, I know what we need to get done. And that makes sure that we don't end up going into this grey area, wait and see, maybe things will sort themselves out. Like there's still right, here's the deadline, here's where we need to go, this is the work we need to do. Yeah,
and as you said, I think that comes down to like the expectations from the beginning. Like I have some clients who come on with me and they say, look, I have maybe been with coaches in the past, it was too restrictive, I didn't like this and that, so I want something that's going to make me feel healthier, feel better in myself, but I want to enjoy it and have it as part of my current lifestyle. Perfect, I know that. So for example, a client started with me there recently, and they have a big family Sunday dinner every Sunday. She didn't want to obviously not have that, which I completely agree with. It's there to be enjoyed. So we give her, we put things in place. We give her buffer calories. I think she has like 900 calories to play around with on a Sunday for whatever she wants, and that's fine. But what I find as well is clients who maybe start with that mindset of, I want to just incorporate this into my life. And when we start making small little changes and they go along the weeks and they start seeing progress and they start feeling themselves getting healthier, they then want to be a little bit more strict. And they'll come to me and they'll say, okay, you know what? I've enjoyed this now. Okay, let's turn it up a level. I'm like, yes, let's go. And it's a really nice way, because if you go in, if you know that that's not what they're looking for, and you go in all guns blazing, we're cutting out this and you're not having this, and this is what we're doing, they're not going to respond to that. Now, I do have clients who want to come in and they're like, right, tell me what to do, let's go. And I know what they need. But when clients want to be that little bit more lenient in the beginning, they find then after, as I said, a few months, they kind of naturally want to then go towards, okay, let's set another goal and let's work towards that a bit harder.
I absolutely agree with that. I think those non-negotiables and those expectations are huge. And I think that most people do just kind of go, well, what else can I do when they start seeing results? But on the flip side of that, I think this comes down to your knowledge again, and you like being investing in your own education to the point where you understand what the work needs to be done, know how important it is, what the wiggle room is and what the wiggle room isn't, so you can explain things. Because for every person that goes, I want to do more, I bet you'll get another person who's maybe been burnt by dieting that goes, I just want sustainable.
Yeah.
And you know from listening to me for many times say this, I hate that term.
Yeah.
But I only hate the term sustainable on day one.
Yeah.
Sustainable at the end of a diet is what we're aiming for. They're fantastic, brilliant word. Let's bind that. But often people come out being burnt by these over strict approaches, and then they kind of just want to have half their footing because they're worried about failing.
Yeah.
Like when you see that, because I know women in particular, right, will have tried many diets and failed. How do you then start to cut through the waffle, the bullshit, the fear, and explain to people that want sustainable? Look, we're going to need to make some changes. Like, how do you have those difficult conversations?
Yeah, I think like that, like my clients know I'm quite upfront with things, and I'll first of all ask them where they want to get to. So, we'll say in the next 3 to 6 months, where do you actually want to get, or what do you want to achieve? And once we know that, I am quite honest with them and saying, okay, well, if you want to get here, you're not going to be able to, have your weekly Chinese, and you're not going to be able to maybe go out drinking every weekend. Is that something you're okay with? Even, for the first 6 weeks? Okay, yeah. And it's kind of seeing what's going to suit them and what they can kind of tolerate. But it's also one of those where I have to explain to them that, if I have clients coming in who are, maybe overweight and they want to get healthier and they want to obviously lose weight, it's having that truthful conversation. And people respect your honesty. I'm not going to tell a client, yeah, you can have all of this and you're going to get this result. Let's just see what happens. It's having that truthful conversation to say, okay, well, if you want to get to here, we're going to have to cut these things out for a while, and then we can maybe have a little break and then bring them back in. And I think it's kind of setting those little smaller mini goals and smaller mini breaks to bring in that kind of keeps them, quote unquote, on track for a period of time.
Yeah, I like that. I think is that okay with you is the key words there that you said, because it's like they might go, actually, I'd rather have my weekly Chinese than be in shape, and maybe I don't need to be as lean, and that's fine. Like whatever you want, but like we need to make sure that we're on the same hymn sheet before we actually start this process.
Yeah, and sometimes it goes the other way. As I had a client who was pre-diabetic, wanted to obviously get health in a good place, wanted to lose weight, and that was fine. And she did her first 2 weeks. She had lost good weight. She was on good track, and then she said, well, I've kind of done well for 2 weeks, so I'm going to have my Chinese this weekend. I'm thinking, no, you don't. It's not like, and I think that comes back to more of like a diet and culture years ago, where you had your similar, you had your Weight Watchers, where if you lost a few pounds every week, then you could kind of celebrate that night with your Chinese and your glass of wine. Where it's like, if you want to get those health markers in a good place and continue to progress, you're going to have to give it another few weeks or months until you kind of can have that takeaway. Not just every week when you lose, a few pounds, you can just celebrate.
Yes, and things I often say to people is like, well, when you're looking at a big celebration now, are you having it just to like reward yourself for losing weight? Yeah. Are you going to remember this meal in 6 months' time? Exactly. If the answer is no, I just want you to think like, look, this is where you want to be. I don't mind you doing this, but this is the impact. Take your pick. It's what I call the Snickers bar analogy. If a Snickers bar is 380 calories, you can have that. You'd have to take out a meal, and you might have to sit with some hunger. Are you right with that? Yeah, I'm fine. I want the Snickers bar. Alternatively, if you go, oh God, I don't want to be hungry, I don't want it anymore. It's now not your job to say, the coach hasn't said don't have this. It's like, look, we've given you the reality of the situation. Yeah. You're an adult. It's your choice. Yeah. And I think like the diet break thing is quite interesting, because not only does it help someone stay mentally able to stick to a diet longer, I'm assuming based off the stuff you're saying about losing cycles earlier on, about potentially being low carb, low calorie, it also kind of fits in from a health perspective, adding in regular diet breaks. Yeah. Is that something you add in at regular intervals with your client, or is it completely client dependent how often you add in breaks?
Yeah, client dependent, definitely. And I think that comes back to kind of knowing that client and knowing just to look out for certain things, as to know like when they're maybe getting to that point in a diet where, they're not that they're not enjoying it, because you're not always going to enjoy a diet, but you can just, you can feel things. Maybe their checking form isn't as detailed. They're feeling a bit stressed, they're getting a bit irritable, So I said, okay, let's take some of that stress off and just let's have a weekend. And I'll very rarely give them, okay, here's, exactly the amount of calories I want you to have. I usually say to them, look, have an untracked meal on whether it is a Saturday or Sunday, have a nice dinner with, your significant other. And that's usually enough for them to just, okay, de-stress, yeah, okay, I had that little meal, I feel better, and then they're ready to go again. And they usually, as you know, they usually find that the scales will drop the next morning, and they're like, oh my goodness, stress has come down, the scales have dropped, this is amazing. And yeah, it just gives them that little bit of a pick-me-up to then keep going for another little while.
Do you feel that, like, with the amount of women you work with, talk about the things we spoke about earlier on, is there a max amount of time you'd have someone in a deficit before you gave them a break based off stuff that you've seen, like a range of how many weeks?
Yeah, I usually never, the longest I'd ever done someone would be for 16 weeks, but with the girls that I'm working with, I don't think anyone's ever actually gone 16 weeks unless they are doing a photo shoot prep. So usually 12 weeks, we'll kind of see where things are. I'll ask them, do you need a little diet break? And like that, even if they have events coming up, okay, let's plan things around the events, and that's going to act as your diet break. But no, I'll never usually go longer than 16 weeks, and that's kind of usually if it's a photo shoot prep. Now, it could be longer if it's a photo shoot prep, depending on where they are. But yeah, I'd say 16 weeks for my kind of non-prep clients will be 16.
And what are the signs and symptoms that potentially any coach really, but particularly male coaches that don't understand this to the same degree, that they should be looking out for to know when maybe they're pushing their girls too hard? Because obviously, ideally, you want this before the cycle disappears.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think if someone is doing a photo shoot prep, and again, this is going to depend on how lean they want to get and where they're starting from, but I would nearly say that you probably shouldn't be losing your cycle for a photo shoot prep. Now, if that is quite extreme, yes, you might lose it 4 to 8 weeks out. But before that, like in terms of looking for things to know when they might need a bit of a refeed, I usually just go on more biofeedback markers. So where's their energy? Yeah, like how's their training? How are they feeling? Like, do they have fatigue? Do they have brain fog? All those things that you're going to probably encounter anyway with maybe lower carbs. And yeah, just kind of speaking to the client in general and asking them how they're feeling. Yeah, that's usually what I go on, to be honest.
Yeah, I will preface this for any coach because that is absolutely sound advice, but I always use this expression whenever I go into sort of this stuff is, if you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebra. When you're looking at, could fatigue be low thyroid and downregulation of thyroid? Sure. But it could be that they've slept shit. It could be that their diet's been rubbish. It could be that they train really hard. So like, sort the obvious things out first, because as you quite rightly said, that you shouldn't really lose your cycle in a prep, and that's because you've managed all the other stress as well. If your training volumes through the roof and they're stressed at work and their home life's terrible and they're sleeping 2 hours a night and their nutrition quality is poor, then you probably won't get as far into a diet before things start to show. And it's like, are these symptoms matching with a lifestyle that should be fine? Then maybe start to look at these things and if they're more important. We went earlier on about how many approaches that there were for getting into a calorie deficit. And I want to talk about one in particular. Why are you not a fan of intermittent fasting with females?
Just like I know I did a video on this, but fasting for females, most of the research has been done on males. So males will respond quite well to fasting, and their cognitive function will be better. And it's a great way for them to strip fat and boost testosterone and all those great things. When it comes to women, it's not we don't respond to fasting as well, especially. And I think this comes down to, when some of my girls say, I never eat breakfast. I always only eat at 12, 1 o'clock. It's like, why? Because we've probably been taught, just push your calories back as much as possible so you have more to play around with in the evening. Whereas that in itself kind of makes that restrict binge kind of cycle, which a lot of females come from. But in terms of fasting itself, you want to be getting your protein, carbs, and fats in first thing in the morning for your hormones to be in a good place. If you're stressed in the morning, like I said, you're stressed in the morning, you're going to fast, you're maybe having a stressful time getting kids out to school, you've got a stressful day in work, those cortisol levels are building. That's going to, again, have an impact on your kind of gut health, your hormone health, everything. And it's just like that, everything's we have our gut-brain axis, we have our HPA, everything, HPA axis, they're all linked. So if one is upset, like stress, it's going to take energy away from the other systems, and you're just not going to be functioning as well as you could. So yeah, fasting for me, I think a lot of females and people in general love the idea of intermittent fasting as like a buzzword. Like, oh, I'm actually intermittent fasting,
Yeah.
and I'll have girls asking me, "Oh, I heard about this intermittent fasting. Do you think I should be doing that?" And what I'll say to them is, from a fat loss standpoint or a health standpoint, it's not necessary. However, if I have girls who that has to be the case because they work shifts and we have to actually, by default, they'll be intermittent fasting a little bit, then fine, because that suits your lifestyle. And again, it comes down to adherence. That's what they're going to be able to stick to. But in terms of setting that as a protocol, no, not for me.
Well, you mentioned earlier on about the impact of insulin resistance on PCOS, right? And if you're chronically spiking blood sugar levels by just being chronically stressed, we've just established this already. If we can kind of have something that maybe balances that out a little bit and brings blood sugar levels down, we can maybe stave off some of this stuff. I think that's hugely important. So going into the pill, I think this is a really interesting topic because there's so many interesting things that have come out in terms of mood changes, psychological changes, to mad things about people finding their partners less attractive when they come off the pill, which is really scary. Now I've just got married and my wife's recently come off it, so I'm like, hopefully I'm still around in 6 months. But like, what impact does the pill have on people, and like, why is this not just a simple decision because everyone else does it?
Yeah, I think like kind of just prefacing this, like I have absolutely no issues with the pill. I was on it for years when I was younger, and I'll probably get into that, like the reason I was put on it. But I think the issue lies where there's just no awareness or education around the pill and what it's doing other than for contraception. So the first thing, obviously, the reason it obviously stops ovulation is because it cuts off that communication pathway we were talking about from the brain down the reproductive system. So that's being completely cut off. So when I was younger, I was under the impression that, I was getting these synthetic amounts of our natural hormones. So it was fine because they were kind of the same. I was just getting them in different amounts, and that was somehow shutting this whole system off. But that's not the case. It's just completely severing that communication pathway, which females don't realize that when they then come off the pill, it's going to take maybe 6 months to 12 months for their kind of menstrual cycle to regulate again and for their ovulation to get into a good place again. And that's something that we're just not made aware of. As well as that, when you're on the pill, it depletes your body of a lot of vitamins and minerals. So things like magnesium, zinc, selenium, B6, B9, all those really obviously important vitamins and minerals that we need. The pill actually depletes your body of those. So what I would say to people, if you are on the pill, making sure that you're actually supplementing with those vitamins and minerals to try and mitigate some things.
Just to clarify that, you were saying zinc, magnesium, and B vitamins are the three things it depletes?
Yeah, and selenium.
Selenium. Okay, cool.
Yeah. But yeah, it's one of those where it's fine if you're on it for contraceptive reasons, and the issue, not the issues with it, but you're aware of what it's doing, then that's absolutely fine. But it's when you're put on the pill for different reasons. For example, myself, I was put on the pill at 14 for my skin, and looking back at that now, it just seems so ridiculous. I had acne, obviously, when I was younger as a teenager, like lots of teenagers do. I tried every antibiotic, tried the cream, and I remember my GP saying to me, well, you could go on the pill and it's absolutely fine as long as you get your bloods checked every 3 months, it's good to go. So I put on it, obviously at 14, skin cleared up. It's great. I think this is amazing. It helped my period symptoms. I'd period every month. It was just regular. I know now, obviously, that wasn't a real period. And it's even more crazy because I remember at the time, my mum took me to every specialist about my skin, and I remember saying to my doctor, is it worth getting a food intolerance test? And he was like, oh, there's no evidence to suggest that, nutrition has anything to do with your skin. So I remember thinking, oh, well, this is great. So I just kept eating, whatever it was at the time, Chinese's and chocolate and growing up. But I think that's what the issue is when people are being put on the pill for issues other than contraception and they're not aware of any repercussions it's having on their kind of fertility and their reproductive health.
And again, it just comes down to that expectation management, right? If you know the drawbacks, the pros and cons of it, like no one's saying don't do the pill. Well, while not doing the pill may be healthier, but if you're 18 years old and you have a child and you haven't got a job, that isn't healthy either. So like sometimes right, well, I don't want kids at this moment in time. I need to go down that route, but I should be educated of what's the things I need to manage to make sure this is healthy. In the same way that taking assistance in bodybuilding or going into a big deficit you're just mitigating the side effects as much as possible, because
Yeah.
we all choose decisions. Being in a surplus isn't inevitably healthy. Being at maintenance isn't always healthy. Like,
exactly.
there's always things we have to manage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing, as you said, it's just being more educated and aware of the side effects. And that comes down to everything, because I mean, everything these days, we can't avoid toxins, we can't avoid things in the environment. And people saying, oh, well, you need to cut out this. And, you know, you can't be lighting candles and you can't be doing this because they're all going to affect your hormones. It's like, is there anything that we actually can do? So it's not having that mindset of being afraid of, oh, I can't do this because it's going to upset things. It's just being aware and making choices where you can to mitigate some of the kind of side effects that these things might have.
And it's learning your body as well, right? Because like if I lived in the countryside compared to living in the middle of Hong Kong where I was the last 4 years, well, I'm gonna have less toxins now than I did 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. Now, we look at people will say things like Paul Saladino. I have this gripe all the time that he's an idiot because he's pro-carnivore, but he's not even a carnivore. He's about 300 grams of carbs a day from fruit and honey. But he's taken out vegetables because he responded badly through acne to defense chemicals and pesticides on plants. Now, no one questions someone who has peanuts and they have an allergy to peanuts. No one questions them going, well, you're an idiot because peanuts are healthy, so just suck it up and don't die. But if people have responded to vegetables in these ways, you're now an idiot and you're now a conspiracy theorist in terms of nutrition. And I think that, like, in that same way that some people respond badly to them, in the sense that people are going to respond differently to the pill, some people respond differently to stress, some people are going to respond differently to different foods. And like, I think if there's anything to take from this, is that, like, certainly when as a girl going through your cycle, it's monitoring it, and that everybody is going to be different. Some people are not barely going to feel it, and some people it's going to be knock them for six. And it's knowing this and mitigating that. So to bring this together, let's look at a few of those things. So pain, pain during your cycle. A lot of girls I know really, really struggle. Is this a good sign? Is this just that's what it is, or does pain an indicator for more?
Yeah, I think we've been like made to believe that pain is just normal. You know, we see in all the movies and stuff as well, and in films we're always dying with cramps, and it's just a normal part of your menstrual cycle. But pain is really common, but it's not quote unquote normal. Now, you will get mild cramping, like a little bit of back pain, but it shouldn't be pain where you're doubled over and having to maybe take a day off work or having to literally, you know, have painkillers every few hours. So with that, it's usually a case, if there's obviously nothing really underlying going on, like endometriosis or PCOS, usually that can be kind of mitigated with just reducing inflammation in the body. You know, like supplemental with zinc and magnesium can be really beneficial. So all my girls will take magnesium and zinc, and kind of just making sure that you're prioritizing your healthy fats, reducing stress, all the things that are going to just reduce inflammation in general, is going to massively help with pain and cramping. Now, if it's severe and you also maybe have irregular periods and you have other kind of symptoms like, you know, migraines and things like that, then you might want to go and see your doctor and see if there's anything else underlying. Maybe get a blood panel done and see if there's anything there either.
Okay, cool. That's it's so interesting to know this as well, right? Because everyone has a different. When I was in my one-to-one days, you have girls cancelling sessions, and then other people being fine and not noticing anything. And this sort of brings me on to sort of my next point is that, like, when you're looking at the general advice for coaches online about the menstrual cycle, I find 9 times out of 10 they are the most overcomplicated things in the world. Where some people are going to have a brand new beginner that's never tracked food in their life. It now has 4 different macro cycles for every different phase of their menstrual cycle. We have different training for every week and different training volumes, so everything changes. Like, what's actually important here in terms of the differences that we need to consider as coaches, and how do we start to work out what's relevant for our clients?
Yeah, I think like the main thing, as we said earlier, us as coaches, the main thing that we want our clients to be is consistent and adhere to something. So if they are new to the gym or new to coaching, or even if they're not, you telling a client that they need to, you know, change their training now based on their cycle every 2 weeks, or as a coach, you're trying to program for a female every 2 weeks, it's just unrealistic. So the main thing that I tell kind of my clients, and I tell coaches as well, if you know this stuff and you have a good idea as to what might be happening in each phase of the cycle, perfect. I mean, you know that, and maybe teach that to your clients to just look out for certain things, but not to have them think that this is exactly how their training is going to feel in each phase, because there's a difference between, and I'll say this to my clients all the time, okay, in your follicular phase, you'll feel great. Trainings might, you're going to be stronger, you're going to feel better. Then maybe in your luteal phase, you're going to, strength isn't going to be there. You're going to feel a bit rubbish. If you go into your sessions with that mindset, you're probably going to perform the way you think. So the way I use it with my clients is I educate them on what they might need to look out for in these phases, but getting them themselves to become more self-aware and body literate, go into every session the same. And if strength maybe is an issue, if you haven't performed as well as you did last week, and it's just having that awareness and, not to beat yourself up about it. It's more about your clients becoming more self-aware with, okay, do you know what? I didn't match those numbers next week, or last week, sorry. That's why, because I'm in, my luteal phase. Oh, okay, I don't need to be so hard on myself. So it's not a case of you need to change and adapt everything based on where you are in each phase. It's having that body kind of literacy and self-awareness to know, oh, okay, right, I know I'm kind of due my period next week. Things might not feel great, but you know what, we're going to go in and try anyway. And then at least you kind of have that awareness of as to why strength might not have been there.
It's like HRV, right? Everyone started tracking HRV on the root bands, and when all of a sudden the HRV dropped and they didn't train tomorrow because my watch didn't. And I've seen people hit PBs in these times, and I've seen people fall to bits in times where their HRV's gone up. And I think it's the same thing here. And the same thing, it's like if we have certain phases where we can handle more carbohydrates, it's not the same thing like you have a license to eat more food.
Yeah.
If you notice that someone has a certain amount of symptoms or they struggle with hunger or appetite control, if you know in this week they can probably get away with a bit more, that's a tool you can throw in the toolbox once the symptom presents itself.
Yeah.
In the same way that like I have like girls that barely have any symptoms. And as you said, it might change. The first time you have someone cycle, they might be keeling over. And then you work on some of that supplementation, you work on bringing inflammation down. Yeah. And if you then give them extra food every time because that's just what the textbook says, then actually they might be coming out of a deficit when you don't need them to come out of a deficit.
Yeah, it comes down to, even as females, we've always been taught, like, okay, and we see it in the movies and everything, you have your period, you're going to be reaching for chocolate, you're going to be in pain, you can't do anything, you need to wrap yourself up and stay in bed. And fine, if you obviously have really, really bad cramps, I'll tell my girls, take the day, just rest, whatever you need to do. But it's one of those, when I told the girls, the first day of our period is when we're most chemically like a man. So our performance should be like spot on. And it's when you hear that, you're like, oh, okay, I don't have to stay in bed and I don't have to, reach for 10 packets of biscuits because that's just what we've been trained to think we need to do. Like, oh, okay, you know what? I have no cramps. I feel quite good. I'm actually going to go train. And usually the girls will feel like, I'm actually feeling really good and I'll go and smash my session if they've no symptoms. But I think it's just that mindset of we've been taught that's how we should feel and that's how we should be acting on the first few days of our period. And that kind of then gets into our heads. But again, it comes back to having that self-awareness of, okay, do I feel okay? Yeah, perfect. Can I train? Yeah, absolutely. And again, movement's going to help anyway with some like cramping, get in, get some blood flowing. It's going to help you feel a bit better anyway. Even if it's not a big heavy weight session, I always say to the girls, just try and get out for a walk, try and get some like cardio in. It's going to help.
Yes, I agree with that. And again, it's just adjusting things as well. Like if you have an understanding of anatomy and what the movement patterns you are working with, if someone comes in with a problem, in the same way that a client would say, I broke my toe, I can't train for 6 weeks. When you go, well, we can do everything from the foot up, right? Like leg extensions, leg curls, like anything upper body. Now, in that same way as if someone is in that first few months getting a lot of discomfort, and maybe if it's really bad, then okay, fine. But like, okay, how do I make sure I train hip extension without loading a barbell on the hip, right? How do I find a comfortable position to do the same thing?
Yeah.
And if you can start to learn that, you can go, right, what's the problem that presents itself and adjust to what's presented rather than having a textbook going, week 3 I do this, at week 4 I do this.
Yeah, I think, and it's even that, when like my girls now will know, okay, I'm not feeling great today, or they'll be kind of more self-aware that they know, okay, I'm actually not feeling great, and I'll say, okay, just reduce your volume by like 20-25%, just go in and get blood flow, and you don't need to go for PBs, you don't need to have the session of your life, but they'll know themselves to reduce that volume or reduce the weights, and it gives them more confidence in the gym and in their training as well when, they know, okay, I'm not feeling great. This is what I'm going to do, rather than trying to pre-plan 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off and change things. That's just not realistic at all.
So you mentioned tracking your cycle early on, just to if someone's listening to this and go, right, I need to pay more attention to this, or I need to pay more attention to my clients in this, like, how would you recommend people start tracking their cycle? Is there certain apps you would use? Would you build it into your spreadsheets? Like, how do you do it?
Yeah, so with my girls, I did a new training with them. So there's something called the symptothermal method, where we track our cycle with our temperature and cervical mucus and things like that, which if you're only starting new out with tracking, I probably wouldn't start there. Now, we do that because we want to see if we've actually ovulated, because as I said in the beginning, you can have a period every month, but you might not actually be ovulating. So when our temperature goes up, we know we've ovulated, so that's why we test for temperature. However, I've even tried doing this myself just recently, and it can be really difficult to get into that routine of taking your temperature first thing. Like, you wake up, you need to take your temperature, especially if you're a busy mom, if you're, you've a really busy lifestyle. It's not, again, realistic for people to take their temperature every morning until you get into the routine. If you are starting out and you've never ever tracked your cycle before, I would just, do it either. Most people will have a Fitbit or something like that. You can track it in the app. So day 1 of your period, that's the first day of your cycle, and you can kind of see when your next one is, and that's obviously the length of your cycle. Now, the only thing with that is it's not going to tell you when or if you have ovulated, so that's just going to give you an idea as to when your period's actually happening. If you do want to start looking a little bit deeper, then apps like Read My Body, I think it's called, or Kindara, that's one I'm using at the minute. It'll ask you about symptoms every day. It'll get you to put your temperature in every morning, and you can then see when your temperature bumps up and stays high until your next period, you've ovulated, and then day 1 of your cycle starts again. So it can take a while to get used to, but I would start off just literally charting it on some sort of app, so you just get into the way of actually routinely seeing where it is, and then maybe take the next step and say, okay, I want to now see if I'm ovulating, and going a little bit deeper into the kind of temperature side of things.
That's interesting, looking at temperature to do this. Now, obviously, that opens up doors as well, looking at thyroid health, which is something that can drop down as well. So if temperature drops really low, we can start potentially looking at this being signs of giving someone refeeds, which is something I did with people in general during the pandemic, because in Hong Kong, you had to take your temperature to be allowed into any building. So everyone was taking temperature to go into coffee shops. So people knew their body temperature dropped massively. We know maybe this is a sign where thyroid output isn't where it should be. And that's quite interesting that we could also use that from a cycle perspective. So this has been really awesome. I think there's a lot of value here for whether it's coach or a girl looking to track their own cycle. But I know that this is just scratching the surface. And I know that you're starting to offer more both to coaches, clients, and obviously to your girls. So from a coach's perspective, if they want to get in touch with you for educating their clients, or from a client perspective, if they want to work with you, how do people find Shannon?
Yeah, usually on Instagram is the easiest. So Shan_shape by Shan. I'm on Instagram, or just Shannon Coghlan, you'll find me.
Awesome. Thank you very much. It's been awesome. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. Loved it.